Hey guys, my name is Priscilla Elias and today I'm going to talk about what I consider to be the best equipment for portrait photography right after the intro. I worked with music back in Brazil and I had a pop music project for which I constantly needed photos for. As I frequently needed promotional material and my independent musician career didn't allow me to pay for a photographer with what I gained from music, which was pretty much nothing, I started learning how to take my own pictures myself. So after studying some and after having some very amateur cameras I won't even consider here, I bought myself a Canon Rebel T3i and a 50mm lens, 1.8, with which I started making very decent photos. Years later, when I decided to become a professional photographer, I started studying again, and after some trials and 2 years shooting portraits of different people all around, I have my personal favorites. Camera. It's kind of hard to talk about which is the best camera for portrait photography. I really don't think that exists, really. You just have to go for the look you like. About 10 years ago, when I started shooting Canon. So I just kept going with Canon not only because I liked the photos I got with it, but also because it was more convenient for me to keep using something I was used to. So when I started shooting professionally, I just switched from the Rebel to a 5D Mark IV, and to me that is a beast of a camera. I'm really happy with it. Lenses. Here's where I have the most precious tips to share with you. I started out shooting portraits with a 50mm 1.8 aperture, and nowadays my favorite lens for portraits is still the 50mm 1.8. And believe me, I have tried many others. As a matter of fact, I use other lenses for portraits as well. But if I had to go with just one lens for a portrait session, that would definitely be the 50mm 1.8, or if I had one, the 1.4. The point is, you get incredible results with the 1.8, and it is so much cheaper than the 1.4 that depending on how much money you've got to spend on your gear, you just go with the 1.8 and you'll be certain that you'll make great portraits with it. There are several reasons why I like this lens so much, and here are some of them. 1, I get nice and creamy bokeh, you know, the very blurry background. I get it with it, and it is good enough for that. Number 2, I like it because in a full frame camera, which is the case of my Canon 5D Mark IV, it seems to be just the perfect focal length in order for me to be able to catch pretty much all I need while still benefiting from the wide aperture that is a great characteristic of a prime lens. So for example, an 85mm 1.8 or 1.4 is also a lens I love for portraits. But I just think the 50mm has a better focal length, giving me more flexibility to shoot wider, and if I need a closer look, since we're talking about portraits, I can usually just get closer to my subject. Also, I just think the 50mm is faster than the 85mm when used in 1.8, depending on the light situation. And even though we're talking about portraits, and that usually we don't have to be so accurate for specific moments as when we're shooting an event, for example, I think even for portraits, it is important to be able to capture the moment. So maybe you said something that made the person laugh, and if you're ready and you got a fast lens, you just catch the moment right there, because unless you're shooting the model, the person you're shooting might not do the same expression. You just missed because your lens was not fast enough again, you know? And here you already got the 2 main things you need to start out with portrait photography. And I really think that's all you need to start out. A decent camera and a good prime lens, on this case, the 50mm 1.8. Now, something I don't use so often, but now that I have one, I always carry with me to my portrait shots, is the 16 to 35mm 2.8. It is not my favorite lens for portraits, but I usually use it for a couple shots to get a different mood to some of the photos I do. It is great when I shoot out in the city and I want to show big buildings or big things which I wouldn't be able to capture with a 50mm. And the thing I love and hate about this lens for portrait is that it easily distorts the subject. So the wider you use it and the closer you are to the subject, the bigger what's close to the lens will look. So for example, if I really want to make something look huge, I just use it on the 16mm and get really close to the subject. And this is something I think is very cool for portraits to do, what is called to be the hero shot. So I get down on my knees, get close to the subject, and then his or her legs will just look much bigger than they really are. It makes your subject look powerful. And if you got a huge, beautiful construction behind him or her, for example, this photo will just be stunning. But then again, I use it only for some specific shots and people love it. But when someone wants their portrait taken, they want to look good on the photo. And if you just take all of your shots with a 16 to 35mm, even though if you work with it on the 35mm, it won't distort as much, especially if you're not too close to your subject, it still doesn't make you look as good as when you shoot the subject with a 50mm or an 85mm. Pris, you said you were going to talk about 2 things, you talked about 3 already. Will there be any more? Of course, eventually you'll feel the need of some other things, especially depending on the portrait shoots you go for. If you want to do indoor portraits, you might want to have a flashlight to bounce off the walls or ceiling when the light situation is not good enough, which happens frequently here in Sweden, for example, since for 3 months of the year we only get a few hours of natural light. Also, if you want to make it look even better, you might want to have an umbrella or a softbox, so you can light your subject directly and still get the beautiful and controlled soft light. But those are things you can add to your photography bag later on. If I were to start out again as an amateur portrait photographer, I would definitely go with a 50mm 1.8 in a Canon Rebel or maybe an 80D or something equivalent. If I was to start out again as a professional portrait photographer, I would still go with a 50mm 1.8, but then I'd try to invest on the Canon 5D Mark IV or maybe a Sony mirrorless or equivalent, you know. So this is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the like button. Also subscribe to my channel. Click the notify button as well so you know when I release new videos, and leave a comment below letting me know what was or what will be your first equipment as a portrait photographer. I'll see you in the next video. Ciao!